Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 2020 Functional Aging Summit. My name is Robert Linkul, and I am very, very happy to be here. I know virtual online, new experience for all of us, but I'm pumped to share with you. I have a ton of information. I've got, 40 slides and about 60 videos I got to share with you. So if at any point while we're going through this, if there's something else you want to learn more about, in terms of the movements, more about my story, more about our business, our services, all that, check out my YouTube page and our landing page, trainingtheolderadult.com, and you will find everything you need to know. Everything on there is free, so check it out. And I am going to turn and burn through some of these first couple of slides here just so we have enough time to get through everything. So a big thank you to you, number one, for being here today. Without a demand for content and a request from all of you to share, us speakers, we wouldn't be here. So thank you very much. And a big thank you to Dan and Cody for hosting, making these quick transitions to get us online and to get us here sharing with all of you. So I did a webinar for FAI maybe a month or two ago. Actually, it was exactly 2 months ago. It was the same day that we were closed on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. And it was geared towards all of the research and information that goes into developing a program for those with arthritis. And a lot of the information connects with those that have osteoporosis as well. So I gave a really good talk on that. If you haven't got to see that, please feel free to go back with your FAI membership. I know you can go back and take a look at that. But today, we are going to touch on it for just a second, but it's all about this, the application of exercises, what's being focused, how we do it, how you coach it, cue it, set it all up, all of that. So this is really geared towards the idea of learning the application of movements for those that have arthritis and how to make training with arthritis more manageable, more comfortable, and ultimately, hopefully, more pain-free. We can't end pain for those with arthritis. We can't cure it 100%, but we can definitely make it a lot more manageable. As I said before, if you want more information about me, you'll be able to see it online. But in a nutshell, this is me, master's degree in personal training from the United States Sports Academy. I own and operate Be Stronger Fitness, which is a older adult focused studio here in Sacramento, California. Proud husband and proud dad of two lovely little ladies, Peyton and Bristol, and I've had a lot of physical limitations. And the reason I like to bring those up is that is in many cases an opportunity for me to kind of connect and work better with the older populations because I've gone through a lot of the limitations that they've gone through or experiences there. So there's a credibility component there, but I'm also super obsessive. And so anytime I go through a physical limitation or one of my clients experience ones that I don't know much about, I am very tunnel visioned and so focused on that. And so I dive into it 100% and I learn as much as I can. So that's where a lot of my information comes from through experiences here. Very quick, just 90 seconds about me. I was a NCAA hammer thrower. I was throwing for Reebok, and I was 1 foot away from qualifying for the Olympic trials. I had sponsorships and pursuits of becoming this high level, high caliber hammer thrower. I wanted to go to the Olympics. And then when my career was over, I wanted to work with high level athletes. I had no intention, no focus on working with older pops. And the more my body started to break down and get tore up, and the more limitations and experiences I went through personally, the more clientele started to kind of attract to me based on those experiences. I'm very verbal, I share, and I've written some books and some stories, articles about my experiences. And from back surgery to lung cancer, carcinoid tumors in my lung, hip repairs, hip replacements, wrist repairs, hernias, all kinds of good stuff. I've had my share of experiences, and that my story is kind of a collection of knowledge from a personal experience standpoint, and also the part about me that's super obsessive about learning more. So why should you trust me? Why should you listen to me with all this? It's because I kind of am an older adult physically, but also I've had a lot of great experiences working with other individuals, mostly older, that have gone through a lot of these same limitations. So I love to show the pictures and kind of give you, a little more experience of some of the stuff I went through. That was a dislocated hip that you saw in that previous x-ray. That's that picture on the top left there. I'm in the emergency room waiting to have my leg reconnected, relocated. I'm not big on quoting myself, but one thing I do like to say is that sometimes your specialty picks you. You just need to recognize it. You need to be aware enough to understand what's happening to you. And luckily, I was aware enough. I definitely recognized that this was a calling for me in an area of expertise that I felt like I was experiencing personally, but I also had a lot of passion for. And the more energy and efforts I put out there, the more people attracted to me with that, and the pursuits to try to get better. And so kind of the rest is history in that sense. I've been a trainer since '99 and have had our own studio and been open since 2014 in our own space, working with our own clients. We've got about 120 clients that come in, and I train in groups, typically around 8. Our new endeavors moving forward now in the midst of COVID, and as we progress, will be 6. And that's something else we can always talk about too. Another reminder as well, though you are listening to this as the event has unfolded, I have pre-recorded this so I can be live with all of you to answer Q&A. So right now, I am on the Q&A box answering whatever questions you want live at this second. So if you have something that comes up, questions, something going along, comments you want to make, anything, just as we're listening to this, feel free to fire away in the comment section, and I'll be there live answering questions back with you. I like to do that and pre-record these so you get a chance to, I get a chance to interact with you and give you as much information as I can, okay? All right, these are just little messages that these are like the common practices of our industry of what people assume from older adults. You're not supposed to lift heavy, don't lift anything overhead. You have to sit down the whole time you exercise, can't do anything fast. You need constant supervision. If you have arthritis, resistance training will make it worse, and that you don't need to lift weights because the body weight stuff that you do is enough. And those are kind of the common misconceptions that we all see, and unfortunately the medical field endorses, television and news stories endorse. So we are always kind of on the forefront of trying to educate our clients with that and to improve that mindset, to change that mindset, to let them understand there are ways to train. There are great benefits to this. You don't need constant supervision. There are ways to do power training that doesn't include snatches and box jumps. There are ways for us to press you overhead. If you have shoulder impingements or a frozen shoulder, there's ways for us to get you there. And with that in mind, we're specifically kind of focusing those last two of why resistance training is so important, and that we can have drastic improvements over the arthritic influence and the pain tolerance that kind of comes with that. Very great research. I just wanted to mention those articles here. These are just a couple of them. AARP is very good to, if you become a member, even if you're under 50, you can still become a member online and pick the things that you're interested in, and they will send you some very good information on there. They have great information about arthritis, osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, all kinds. There's over, 100 different variations or types of arthritis and such. And they have great articles in there, very well researched, not very commercial, so they get to some good facts there. So feel free to check those out too. And let's dive into this. Okay, so remember, any questions you have, fire away. I'm here, okay? All right, training with pain. I use a term called rigging. When we rig things, it doesn't mean that it's done poorly. It means that it's modified or adjusted. You know what I mean by poorly, like, oh, let's just rig it together real quick. We're modifying and creating a movement pattern in a different way that we're not avoiding the limitation, we're working with that limitation. And it can be small things from a bilateral stance to a contralateral, from a pronated grip to a neutral, with some band assistance to none, with overhead assistance to none. So really, I want you to keep in mind here, when we talk about progressive resistance, I'm talking about this video here, progressive tension in the bands. It gets harder as she presses up, easier on the way down. I'm going to use that term a lot. It's accommodating resistance as well as another term used that way. And then we have consistent load, which would mean I give you 20 pounds and it's always 20 pounds, right? You hold a dumbbell, it's always 20 pounds no matter how you manipulate it. So you have progressive resistance, you have consistent resistance. Progressive resistance in this case, in this example specifically, as Susan comes down and she hinges, we're going to call that position a little more vulnerable, right? She could, if she hinges incorrectly, or something along those lines, with the knees and the shoulder, if she rounds her back, she could become more vulnerable or prone to an injury. So in this case, the weight gets lighter as she's at the bottom, right? The band is loose or looser. The weight stays the same with the bar, but the angle gets lower. And then as she progresses the bar up and starts to lock out, starts to stack all of her joints up and give good support above her, the band gets tighter as she gets into a stronger position. So more vulnerable, less tension, more secure and stable, more tension. And so we want to utilize that progression of tension and load to work in our benefit while we're working with our individuals suffering with this. Other thing we got to keep in mind too, and you'll see another slide on this in just a second, is the arthritic grace period. And this can be anywhere from 2 to 12 weeks. I know that's a very big gap, but there's very good support. This says 50% increase. I think it's upwards of 60 now from new research that I've seen, that people are going to report a up to 60% decrease in their pain. If you have dealt with any chronic or long-term pain, especially in joint, 10% improvement is great. 60% is phenomenal. So knowing that it could take anywhere from 2 to 12 weeks for us to, in some cases, actually aggravate and make it worse because they're learning to train with this period now through this period, it needs to kick in. It needs to, their body needs to adapt, and they need to learn this new style of working with these manipulations of movement to help get them strong and eventually get through that grace period to see the benefit on the other side. So a lot of times you will have clients report to you, 2 weeks in, my hands hurt more, or my shoulder's really bothering more. As long as it's not a drastic increase, we do need to stay the course with this, because the research supports, being able to maximize the benefit with everybody if we can work through. So baby steps, very small, smooth through your progressions with them. Take your time, get lots of feedback, and work your way through. Big components here. Mastering mobilities. So you see thoracic rotation, bridges, bird dogs. I like to put people in some unique positions. John's one of our more advanced clients here. So we're working on some coordination and balance. I've got him in a safe position where if he needs to put his hands down on the bench, he can. But we're working on some multi-component or compound complex type movements where it's not one thing at a time, just a bicep curl, right? We're able to manipulate and work 2 or 3 different check boxes. Contralateral movement, balance, coordination, reaction time, posterior chain activation, right? You want to have multiple things you can check off. And by doing that, we're kind of simulating what you do in regular life. We do multi-compound complex movements throughout our day of picking up and transferring and putting down. And so we're trying to train the body to work with some of those patterns. Things that we really want to master bilaterally, these are always good foundational things to start with. Your sit to stands, your proper pickups, and proper put downs, or what we call a replacement. So picking up the groceries, carrying them inside, setting them down, and doing that multiple times, along with putting things overhead and taking them back. These are all, your ADL plus, your advanced movements of life that we want to do beyond toileting and transferring and, food prep and that kind of stuff. We want to be able to pick up and put down and get up and down off the floor and up and down stairs. And these are the pieces that will lead to us there. As we progress through the programming, you also want to place an emphasis towards more unilateral movements to try to find some kind of muscular equality. If you have I call it bilateral dominance, like even though we're moving bilaterally, as you fatigue your right side, if you're right-handed, typically will kind of take over and do more. So if we can work unilaterally more with our clients once or twice a week for an hour or whatever we have them, if we can do more emphasis on unilateral work, I think we can do more justice for them to kind of help balance those things up. And as the muscular balances occur, we start to see some very good results long-term on our arthritic components. So single arm pulls, pull starts, overhead presses, RDLs, single leg glute bridges, if we can get there. And then understanding that all of this funnels down to fall prevention. That's a big piece of what we're emphasizing. And then here's just a little more information on that grace period, what's happening, your oxygenation exchange deep into the capillaries and such. There's just a little more information there. Understanding the difference between pain and discomfort, explaining that to your clients and letting them know that we are going to have some discomfort, but I don't need this so much that, it trashes you and your body's wrecked and you just can't train anymore. That's definitely too much. Okay. Some suggestions, some things that help out, especially with the hands here. This is a big piece for you. These are called angle 90s. I'm not connected financially at all with any of the companies that I'm going to show you. I have zero financial returns from any of these companies, any of them at all. But I believe in this product so much and I love it. I use it personally. You can see them in my gym here right behind us. I use them here in the bunker as our home gym. And our clients absolutely love them. It's an ergonomic handle that you can attach to pretty much anything. And it's designed to fit into the hand. It's thick. It's a little bit bigger than a bar. So those with arthritic components with the hands, they're not over gripping or over crunching at the wrist. And so it's a really comfortable addition of a handle. They're $50, I think now. They were a little more expensive, but they've become a little more streamlined. it's a great, great product. So when you're looking for comfort, especially with arthritic issues at the hand and the wrist and the elbow, any handle will do. This is just the one that I found the best to be. So working with neutral grips, allowing for rotations to occur naturally, as you saw Ellen doing here on these pull starts. We do a palm down to palm up rotation. That's natural for the bicep, and the brachioradialis naturally wants to supinate. So we try to find those natural movement patterns and embrace those, as long as it's not aggravating for the client, to kind of work with natural movement patterns and get stronger in those. And then with the lower body, the hinging components are huge. So I'm going to show you some deloaded hinges and deloaded split stance variations where you can lighten the body up, teach the range of motion, the proper actions, and then slowly progress back to body weight, and then eventually to more load. But if we don't practice that movement pattern and establish the range of motion and develop this baseline strength, we're going to continue to just try to do things on a poorly structured or sound foundation, which I think is going to end up just causing more issues at the end. All right, so let's get into this. Here's our blueprint. Now, our blueprint at Be Stronger, it's based on TOA, training the older adult. And we have 5 components we train every day: a hinge, a row, a split stance, some kind of loaded carry, and some kind of action from overhead. And these are the progressions from the most simple to more complex to the most complex. And then we have 2 modalities we train every day: fall prevention and power production. And so I can implement fall prevention and power production skills into any of those 5 movement patterns above, any of those 5 components. So keeping that in mind, without breaking up each one of those as we went through, I tried to simplify it down a little bit to give you all these options. We're basically looking at implementing resistance training about the shoulder and about the hip. And I'm going to give you as many options as I can over the next 45 minutes here to see how many different ways you can implement some of these actions. Some of them might be a little bit more advanced, some might be a little easier, but it'll give you a little idea where to start. A lot of the arthritic components that we see specifically for the hand, elbow, and wrist come from overuse, meaning we're just gripping and squeezing and over flexing our hands way too much, or we're doing it incorrectly. So there's a lot of techniques that I like to use with our clients, as seen here. I like to get into rice buckets and have them do, these are called 180s, where you turn your hand up and down like a big flipper and just rotate in the sand there. You see at the top right. We do opens and closes, where you dig your hand in there and open it and just feel the resistance of the sand in there. And then we have little rotation squeezes you can do. We have the little squishy balls. Notice the grip that I'm doing. I'm not just crushing it with all 4 fingers. I'm focusing on, 2 or 3 fingers at a time. I do all 4, and then I do the next 3, and I'll focus on like my middle finger and ring finger. I kind of squish it and roll it through my hands. I'll use my thumb for a couple. I'm just trying to change the variable and different key fingers, pinky and index, just different components there, mixing it up to develop that strength in there. The bottom left, the little rubber bands, you can use those blue rubber bands you get around like broccoli stalks when you buy them. Save some of those. They're big and thick and they won't roll over. Or you can buy something like these. I couldn't even tell you the brand name. They're all over on Amazon and such. They have the little finger rubber bands on them, and those extensions opening the grip, such a key component. We call it an anti-arthritic grip, which is open hands and extended wrist, and everything will hang on to, quote unquote, will hook to the back of the hand. You'll see that here in a second. And then these little pinch grips at the top, we'll take 2.5-pound plates and just start pushing them together and have our clients pinch them and lift them. Notice my hand there at the bottom, both videos. See my scars there? This is post-wrist surgery. I had a tendon repair and a carpal tunnel release. And so these have been big pieces for me to help like rebuild that grip strength and coordination and extension and flexion strengths. And the benefits from that have gone for all of our clients across the board. So definitely something to think about. We'll use those as primers, like little warm-ups to do while our clients are, one's doing an exercise, and while they're waiting and kind of doing their active recovery, I'll have them put on the rubber bands and do their extensions. And then on the next set, I'll have them get in the rice bucket and turn. And so once you have all that set up and kind of at a station, just at any point throughout the workout, I need you to pop over, do a set, and then come on back, okay? All right, so here are the shoulders, the ones we're gonna work at: push, pulls, presses, and rows, all about the shoulder. I have 6 of them, but there's a whole bunch of examples of each. So it'll give you some opportunities to kind of see which one of these that we have. Now, these are the bottom one. These are called pivot point arms. You'll see these with Rogue or Sorinex or Samson. A lot of these companies have these pivot point arms. The one that Steve's doing here at the top, these are ring straps. These are 880-pound ring straps. Same ones you'd buy if you were going to buy rings to do like muscle ups and pull ups on. They're pounded and used for over 1,500 pounds of pressure. They're geared for that, so you can load these up heavy. And then I don't have a ton of time to go into the leverage systems, but the leverage of your body, your leverage system through the shoulders and the hips when we get to the hinges, and the leverage of the strap, those two levers work very well to support each other and allow for a big range of motion to occur, but also a good amount of load to be transferred and to be manipulated. So you'll notice Steve, as he's doing this, I've got him in a contralateral stance. You can do bilateral, all kinds of options. You can do a consistent load that's on there. He's got 200 and something pounds on there, but also the bands that are going to make this progressively more resistant and a little less. So the eccentric phase coming down is really the most beneficial. We can use momentum. We can transfer the weight out, get it out there, and then eccentrically work it down. So we've got a huge core component to manipulate that weight. There's a very good fall prevention component to this that emphasizes manipulating load against your body's inertia. And that is very key on like spatial awareness and learning how to manipulate your body in space. So if you can act upon an outside force, we start getting into Newton's laws and such. If you can be acted upon by an outside force and not fall down, when you're by yourself, you have a greater opportunity to control you in space because he's used to having all these hundreds of pounds push on him. You know, he's trained himself to stay upright very well. And make sure if you are doing contralateral stances to switch with each set so you're not overdeveloping. Every action, every movement has a preparation phase, an acceleration phase, and a follow-through. So with this, he's preparing by pushing the weight away. His follow-through is right at the end where it transitions to come back. And then the follow-through, or excuse me, the preparation phase is the eccentric phase coming down. The acceleration is him pushing it up there. And then the follow-through is that change in direction. So we're really emphasizing the preparation phase. The eccentric down is where you're going to get a lot of that great work and coordination control. And our tempos on this, I love 3-to-1s. Eccentric always comes first when you see these tempos written like that. So it's always eccentric, concentric, and then if there's a third one, that's an isometric hold, okay? So in this case, it's 3, 2, 1 down, 1 second up. 3, 2, 1 down, 1 second up. Big range of motion, as comfortable as the client can handle. And then limitations, typically you're gonna see back and hip issues and shoulder issues that are bugging people doing a bench press or a kneader press, military press, something like that. These are going to give you opportunities. These two lifts here are going to give you opportunities to work with this range of motion, this action, and still get benefit without aggravating. So pronated grip to now neutral. You see how Susan's got a neutral grip here, no bands. The arms are just 35 pounds by themselves. As she pivots, they probably get a little heavier, a little lighter as she works through her range of motion. And then some other actions that we have, same everything on the left here. This is a top assisted. So Gary's got some issues with heavier loads in the rotation of the impingement of his shoulder at the bottom at deep flexion. So the bands are hooked up to make the arms lighter at the bottom right there. And then as he presses, he takes the full load of 35 pounds. But as he comes down, the bands lighten it up a little bit and they make it about 20 pounds at the bottom. So we're able to train his deep flexion position, work on his full extension strength, his lockout strength, but still give him assistance at that range of motion that bothers him by making it a little lighter. And then Steve has a component here as a bilateral kneeling. So a lot of core work, a lot of component here. Notice the angle 90 handles that are on there. He's going to spin around and row this in a second. I'll show you that. So you can have multi options here on how to work from push to pulls or supersets. So constant counter lean, great core work, great opportunity to kind of establish like a anterior, posterior base while manipulating this weight and acting upon it. And then we have some single arm options here for you too. So Elizabeth has a shoulder impingement and I think a supraspinatus tear in her shoulder. And then Cooper's son is a shot putter. So you'll notice the difference between the two of them as we go. She's in a contralateral stance and working this constant forward lean, no weight, just the pressure of the band. Cooper is in a bilateral stance. He's got a little dip, a little push press action with extra load on there and a band. Okay, so we're giving him some opportunities to apply in a little bit more sport specific, but also Elizabeth to apply more to the limitation which she's dealing with. And then for those that don't have straps, you can do this with just a heavier band. So you have to kind of work up the ramp, but you'll notice here I have a dumbbell attached to my band. And so it's not ideal, it's not perfect. I prefer to have the strap, but as long as you have a high anchor and a fairly thick band that can give you some support, it's that leverage system of the shoulder against the lever of the pivot or of the strap or of the band that allows those two to kind of manipulate and ramp against each other, that allows for a more trainable full range of motion that will help overcome some of the limitations in the shoulder. Like a frozen shoulder basically is an individual that either got hit a bunch of times on the shoulder and it's kind of compacted it down. So you see a lot of rugby and football players get that because they get hit over and over and over again, hitting that down. Or it's from just not putting your arms over your head or not training in that position. And it's almost like the structure of the shoulders is like, I'm just not going to do that anymore. So in injuries, there's always injuries that come in between there too, that you hurt your shoulder and that's why you don't put your arm over your head anymore. I get that too. Point is if I can kind of break through this, a lot of the therapies to get frozen shoulders back again is basically just to knock people out so they don't feel it and to just force range of motion and just circumduct and work it again and get it moving. And they kind of break up the scar tissue and everything that's in there. In a sense, this is a way for us to do that by leaning the two levers of the body and the strap against each other to kind of force that range of motion. What I need to find is, where are my hands most comfortable? Where are my arms most comfortable? What angles can I work? How can I apply more or less load, right? That's the art of training that kind of comes into this to say, hey, these are ways that we can accomplish this. We can accommodate the client, but still achieve it, still work on pursuing this goal, right? So that said, that's your pushes, okay? Now onto the pulls. This is, notice you'll never see any of our clients do anything with back support unless we absolutely need it. So seated, remember my thing I put at the beginning, we don't do stuff sitting down. Seated here, no back support. This is an inertial lean. So for Mary to do this, she has to counter. She's got 95 pounds on here. She has to counter, and she's 90 years old, by the way. She has to counter this with her body weight. She's in a constant inertial lean backwards, just very slight. She uses a little momentum to help her get back there, but that momentum allows the pivot arm to swing out further, creating a greater eccentric response for her to lower down. So even though you think like, oh, I'm cheating, I'm getting a little momentum to get up here, that cheat creates a heavier load that wants to swing back. And in that case, we're actually making it harder, right? We're getting more eccentric control. As long as it doesn't rip her forward because she can't control it, she's actually getting the benefit. Swing it up there, lower it down slow, that eccentric counter lean, great core work, great component, again, like we talked about earlier with Steve, inertia, and you're learning to manipulate your body weight against something in space, teaches you how to manipulate you very easily, okay? So acceleration up, follow through as she changes direction, preparation phase on the way down, very slow, gradual, good control. Shoulder impingements are big, elbow, wrist, hand issues are typically pretty common and can be uncomfortable for set fixed handles on rowing machines or cable pulleys. So adding the angle 90 on here or some kind of handle that allows for some freedom of rotation or of alignment wherever you want to put it. It's not fixed with a tight, grooved handle. It says you have to hold here. You can adjust and manipulate this wherever you want to. And that counter lean, as long as our chest is up and our back's in a good arch position, is a constant counter inertial lean, like a plank for the back. Great, great benefits there for those with lower back limitations and injuries. Again, assuming that PT has allowed and cleared all these actions. Now we're going to go to a contralateral position, one side at a time here. This is a preload, meaning that instead of it just being a band and a handle, we've got a load on there. So Ruth has 35 pounds of a kettlebell already, plus the extra band at the low anchor. She can work that 35 pounds against the anchor, against the pivot point of the strap. It gets harder, harder, harder as she comes up. I'm working with the rotation of the handle. Remember, we talked about that pronation, supination, how the elbow and the shoulder naturally wants to external rotate, supinate into position, and allows external rotation at the shoulder and allows that kind of corkscrew in. The rhomboid can retract, the scapula can slide back, the hood of the shoulder can open. I mean, it's pulling everything back shoulder-wise into a great row position with maximal tension, and then I can eccentrically let that out. So acceleration back, follow through, change direction, eccentrically let it down as we go through. Benefit eccentrics over, over, over. It's not really time under tension because typically those are assisted on the other side by an outside force, a spot or something like that. This is true eccentric control is what we're focusing on. And some of these, if you really want to get great benefits from your clients, try a 4-to-1 or a 5-to-1. Like we have a joke in our gym we called suffer good, right? meaning that it's a good benefit for us, but it's hard. It's very challenging. So we want our clients to suffer good as they work through some of these eccentrics, right? Here is the pivot point arms. So notice I've got Steve up high so we can row up like a high rhomboid, low trap. Band, low anchor, really, really low with the band. So it creates a little different angle for him. And he's in a counter lane. If I were to cut those bands real quick, he'd go tumbling backwards, right? So he's in a constant counter lane, good core component, fall prevention like we talked about. He's learning to counterweight. He's learning to shift his center of mass outside his frame. So he's learning what that's like to manipulate and hold himself in space that's not just center gravity, center mass. And he's learning to kind of use a counter pull right now, even though the eccentric phase is pulling him. He's in a constant displacement, getting his core to be very strong and to get used to that external force to overcome. Now moving into some shoulder actions. These can be tricky ones too. I have a whole screen process. It's free on our YouTube as well that takes you through teaching and basically observing if someone can do overhead actions in the first place. If not, we would do different overhead pulls and different raises. But we're assuming at this point our clients are cleared to do overhead. They're just not good at it or they can't do it yet, but it doesn't hurt them, okay? So with some of the pivot points here, same idea, a lever against a lever is gonna help us range of motion wise. This is the same one I showed you with Susan earlier with all the lines on it. You get some hip, some displacement easier, and then that high reach, we're cueing the ears, the elbows to go beyond the ears and try to get at least in line with, if not further, where if I were to freeze that high position, right where Lisa is here, if we were to freeze this and then turn the camera upright, right, make her vertical, she's pretty much in a vertical overhead press, pretty close. But we're benefiting the two levers working together to create a range of motion she can't typically do due to an impingement. So preparation, bringing down, follow through the change, and then accelerate up, and then be ready for that great tension to bring down, down, down under control, centering through the rhomboids in the back, counterweighting through the hip, and creating that momentum to come through again. So this is a great one, bilateral dominant. You can produce some pretty good power in this too if you want to move quickly and then really slow down through that eccentric phase. Benefits on both ends, great transitions. You're going to see shoulder and back issues here typically where this is going to be a good counter, a good tool to use. With back limitations, I know I'm talking fast because I know how much I have to get through, but I want to get it all. The counter lean into this with back limitations, especially like vertebral disc compressions, herniations, bulges and such. If you continue to lean into the lever, if Lisa continues to just constantly lean forward, like she's trying to slide that bar away from her, it won't, but like she's trying to, the lever of the bar will be supporting and pushing into the lever of the body and vice versa. So think of it like two walls and a roof of a house. They build up and then they kind of brace them into each other to support. A lot of the pressure on the lower back goes away because you're leaning the leverage support onto the landmine, to the bar in front of you. Thus, we're able to train the range and build strength, and we don't have pure vertical compression overhead like we would in a push press or a front squat or a goblet squat. We've got support, so now we can benefit from the overload. Now our SAID principle comes into play because we can specifically tap to this big overload imposed demand to help us get stronger, but we have support to help us with our back, right? So all these great wins, win, win, win all the way across here, as long as we're plugging in and implementing the right piece. Then we can do some contralateral and work one arm at a time. Now these are just consistent loads, no bands. Notice the boys, a couple of them, they get a little dip, a little punch into it, but working that slower, good control, like a 2-to-1 tempo down with such heavy load. And they're reaching their head through, they're getting that maximal range of motion. Okay, work the leverage. If we're gonna benefit from using a levered landmine, let's get all the way up and let's load it a little bit. If they ever get in trouble, they can just dump the bar, but it gives them a really good opportunity to work this range of motion with a heavy load they typically couldn't do. All right, some of the rows. The reverse push-up, one of my favorite exercises. I just put up, by the time you guys see this, it'll be about 2 weeks ago, that I put on our Facebook page, this new one that's a reverse push-up wall slide with the bands going overhead. It's a great complex. And so this reverse push-up, this is that anti-arthritic grip I was telling you guys about, where you hook your hands through the band. Now you can do anchors. You see Betty down here on the bottom left, these little anchor straps I put on there so it's easier on the skin. Sometimes the rubber on the skin really bothers our clients. Or you can hook a looped like ankle straps, the ones that go around your ankles. You can hook those on, Velcro them, but the key to this is the hands have to be open. As soon as you loop your hands over, we've lost the anti-arthritic component, because we're now gripping rather than extending through the hands, and we're flexing in the wrist instead of extending at the wrist. So if you look at me real quick, I know I'm small on that screen. I'm probably 60% of forearm on my flexors and maybe 30-40% knowing I've got some center stabilizers right on the backside. The more balanced you can get this, the more functional the wrist is going to be in the center. So you look at all of our issues. We have carpal tunnel, that's a forward flex issue. We have tennis elbow, golfer elbow, both on the inside or maybe just the electron process to the outside of the elbow. All of those occur from sporting events, golf, tennis, grip, 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 flex, 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 divot into the ground. Everything goes forward, down, flex, tight. So if we want to work both sides of the wall, both sides of the pulley, and we're already over contracting, constricting, flexing, gripping, let's work the opposite side of that, extending, opening, extending through the hand and pulling back, and now put pressure on that. Work those reverse curls, those reverse extensions, hammer grips, right? All of that, any opportunity you get to work the back side of the arm, great, great benefit, and you're going to see drastic improvements with your clients. We have clients with that golfer elbow, tennis elbow issue on the outside of the elbows. We'll have them do like 2 sets of reverse curls with 7s or 5s at the end of every session for like 3 weeks, and it's gone, right? It's just something so minimal can have such great effects. So same thing goes here. As you do this reverse push-up, open grip, we're withdrawing the elbows straight back. You want to feel like your arms are on like a tabletop and they're just going to slide back. So as the girls are going here, Barbara especially in the front, you could hear me cueing her. I'm saying you got to get more elbow back, more squeeze behind you. Yep, there she goes. She starts to displace. Then we have a higher anchor, Linda here at the top. Go back here and get her rolling. Oops. So a higher anchor. So we're getting down and back a little more. We're working like lower lat, right around the high end of the lumbar there. And then Betty, a little bit high anchor here. The anchor points, the counters are key. So if you have clients that have like neck issues, we want all of our anchors up high, because the counter from the high is down low, right? We want everything going down between the rhomboids and like their lats, down towards their back pocket. If the anchors are down and in front of them, everything's going to contract up around the occipital and make them crunch up in their levator and everything up in their neck tension-wise. I want to retract and repress and like pull everything back and down and like anti-shrug people back into position, okay? And then this last one I show you here of me, if you don't have anchors, you can just create your own anchor. Just hold the mini band. And this is an alternative to anchor high points, is we call it an alternating reverse push-up. So we can do that guy there. And then you'll notice from the side here, I'm pulling that elbow back, trying to restrict and pull and like get that rhomboid action in the back. Great actions here for you. Second component from that, 2 different angles of kneeling pulls. I love to kneel during a pull because it takes away the counter momentum that you would get from your legs, the kind of heaving or displacing components that we get from that. So I want to restrict this, not allow them to cheat, and focus on this overhead reach, let the band pull them into position, and then they engage. We call it the elbows and the grapes. You have, grapes in the armpits. If you have grapes in your armpits, you want to squish it with your elbow by crushing down, pulling back, and like crush everything down into there and finish in that like proud, like Superman, dun, 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 like that pull down stretch position to force that proud chest, shoulder engagement, shoulder blade retraction, postured up position to finish the pull. Because the more I do that, the more retraction strength I develop, the more I free up that hood of the shoulder. When I talk about the hood, I mean the scapula, from us being forward and flexing and chesting and biceping and everything forward in front of us all the time, we get curved. We actually get a curve or a hood of the scapula that folds the coracoid process over, and everything goes down and in, and it doesn't allow you to reach your arm overhead. That's a frozen shoulder. So if I can restrict, retract, pull back, and open that, all of a sudden I can circumduct, I can wall slide, I can move my shoulder because the hood is open. So these are big pieces. How can I force that through a range, through these leverages, to allow this action to occur very, very light, and then build and build and build. And then the second row component we have here is a displacement row. So she drops her butt back, she pulls from the shoulder blades. This is a low anchor. So Bill worked a high, he's working low lat, low rhomboid, and he's doing just the opposite. We're working kind of horizontal here as we displace. But this is a great piece for clients with back and hip issues because we're working small, like minimal little pelvic tilts. So we're developing that strength. The leverage of the body's shorter. She's on her knees, so there's not a lot of vertical compression here from too long levers of the legs and the torso. It's a really, really short leg action, so that helps. She gets to displace, but the band gets tighter as she displaces, so we get a benefit of the overload. Notice the hands, okay? Hands get this natural rotation. They kind of come in here. She can work through those elbow issues, shoulder issues, right? Little manipulations, little displacements, all these little things. Good eccentric controls. You guys notice the levers, the range of motion, and the concentric, eccentric phases. Those don't change for any of these, right? We're pretty much emphasizing like those are the pieces that we want to work through all of this. And then some alternative rows here. This is just a hinge complex. I love this. Hinge, row up, row down, return. You can stay pronated, you can rotate, you can stay supinated, stay neutral. And the beauty of this is the band will kind of pull and displace you down, let you get there, and then the row's a little harder. And if you notice my bands, I have one blue, one green. So I'll do 8 of these with an overload, and then I'll switch and do 8 more, right? You could use 2 evens if you want to, but this little complex, this teaches them how to properly pick up, stand up. I've got my load. If I were to walk somewhere and then hinge and put it back down, I'm basically training that action over and over and over again. And we know that a lot of our injuries and a lot of our limitations come from reaching down to pick something up, a sock or a pillow or whatever it is, and that injury occurs, boom, just like that, right? And then another counter lean here. This is a pulley system with those angle 90 handles. And Annabelle, no back support. She's on a low bench. Notice the band in the back, so it makes it a little harder as she pulls it. She's got a counter lean squeeze, lift her chest up, and then allow that 50-pound bag that's got another 30, 40 pounds of tension on it to eccentrically lower down. Counter lean, pull, eccentrically let out. All of those eccentrics make people really, really strong, okay? All right, I got 20 minutes to turn and burn through the hips here. So that's all the upper body, push, pull, press, and row. And now we're gonna get into this second bit here. Levered landmines, levered deadlift landmines. Couple different options you have here, just the strict, straight out of the box here, landmine, interlock the fingers or hook them, and a levered deadlift, hinging forward, constant lean forward. Notice that is a leverage cue I'm gonna use over and over and over again. As you push your hips back, you have to counter lean by pushing your hands forward, trying to slide the bar, okay? Great core engagement. The 2 levers we talked about quite a bit before, how they support each other, how they help you and implement this. And anybody with back or hip issues, when this is done correctly, it's a whole new world of opening up opportunities for them to feel really comfortable doing deadlifts. This is a band anchored, see the band around her feet. And then this is a dual landmine lever deadlift, also known as like a car deadlift in the world of strongman. Basically, we have a landmine and a landmine, and then this is a yoke handle at the top. You guys know what a yoke is. It's like a big squat rack you can load, and you pick the whole thing up and carry it. We have one of these. We rarely use it, but I was able to slide it onto both bars and basically create, you know, like a 3/4 of a box that they could lever and lift up. So this gives you a great opportunity there to have some load, plus the band makes it harder, harder, harder as she comes up. And it's a posterior displacement, which we don't get to do a whole lot of, okay? Posterior displacements like this one here are fairly advanced. So you wanna make sure clients aren't just standing up straight and leaning against it, they're countering it. This is a big hex bar in a landmine. I'm facing forward, so I'm getting this counter lean of my hips back and my chest up, and I get to counter my hip through, lifting a little more weight than I'm typically comfortable doing, okay? And then I can flip that around and attach my angle 90s on here. You see my angle 90 grip gives me an opportunity to be a little wider with my grip. My shoulders are back, I'm engaged, but that constant forward pressure, constant lean makes me feel very comfortable, very good with this lift. And then if I want to add a little bit more to this, see I threw the band on there, self-anchored, meaning it's under my feet, and the band's just going to kick in a little bit right at the top and make it a little harder for me. A little harder for me. Every time I come up, just that lockout component. Once you kind of master the idea of doing this basics and learning that you can kind of counter lean and work with that pivot, we can make it a little heavier. We could add some bands to make it a little more progressive in the lockout. And then you can spin around and learn what it's like to displace posterior, lean and retract and shrug and get that leverage, that ability to pick up. Think of it like if you saw a 100-pound tree or a log that fell in the woods and you just wanted to pick it up a little bit and move it. Individuals that can't deadlift 100 pounds can do that action because you're working with the lever, you're lifting the leverage system. This is the same idea. How can we take advantage of that lever system and benefit from some of the load that we're going to work with? Okay, so there's our landmines. All right, skier squats, little hinges here in this guy. Skier squat gives you an opportunity to work a high hinge point under deep flexion at the hip, allows for eccentric stretching of the hamstrings every time we come up, but we have a band around the knees as a abductor to include all three glutes, not just your glute max. You want medius and minimus to fire, but the counter band in the front gives that retraction strength, the rhomboids and the lats and the posterior delt and the long head of the tricep. It gives it something to pull back against. So this is a very good opportunity to practice deep hinging components with a on-off basis. Sit down, stand up, sit down, stand up, turn the muscles off, turn them back on, turn them off, turn them back on. And as we practice that hinge action and that deload action, we have a constant posterior activation as we go through. So those with tight backs, tight glutes, tight hammies, this is a great benefit to work through these hinges. And those that are really tight, just start a little higher. Put a couple pads underneath there, get them stacked up nice and high, and just let them work a short angle, and then eventually work a little heavier, a little heavier, a little heavier as you go on. The second option you have here for some ski sit to stands or some ski squats is kind of the advanced next action would be to take to a sit to stand. And with the sit to stands, the same idea. I love that sit down, turn it off, re-engage. And what that does is think of your quads and your glutes and your hamstrings when eccentrically stretched, they're like a slingshot. They've got this catapult, stretch, 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 and they're ready to fire, right, and snap forward. When you eccentrically stretch the quads and your glutes on the way down and they're ready to snap and fire back up, there's a transition of momentum there that you get. When I sit down and I shut it off for a second, I lose all that. So I call it pure strength efforts. Instead of saying I'm going to do 3 sets of 10, I'm actually doing 10 sets of 1 and then a rest for a while and then another 10 sets of 1. Like each one of these is an individual effort because they're no longer connected through that eccentric stretch fire. You have to shut it off and start over again. Shut it off, start over again. So with each one of these bouts, you kind of maximize the practice and the idea of like, I need to engage my muscle and learn how to get out of the box and sit down, shut it off, get out of the box. So these are all benefits to that. Because we know we're such glute max dominant when we do use our glutes, I like to have bands around the knees and make our clients push apart to activate your other two abductors, glute medius minimus. So we get all three of those trained often. And then self anchors of bands under the feet is going to create that tension as you come up where it's going to get tighter, tighter, tighter. And then as I get more vulnerable and I go to shut off, the band goes almost slack. Now we're going to include some upper body actions, some upper body pieces to this to allow different hand positions or extra loads. So this is my daughter's little 5-pound training bar that I gave Linda. And she's pushing the knees apart. She gets an opportunity to work on like a wider handle position that she can kind of pull apart on and retract and anchor that good posture around. Or we can do like a goblet. I've run the band through the center of the goblet of the fat bell there. If you guys haven't seen fat bells, phenomenal. It's a hex bar for the wrist. It's one of the best things we've done with our clients, moving away from dumbbells and getting on these guys. And just real quick, if you think of a dumbbell, weight on each side, and yet everything we do through our day is forward and back, right? So we're training our hands and wrists to be very stable and to support weight on either side of it. But when I need to do forward and back actions like I do through most of my day, I don't have any load to manipulate. I just have to balance. So the center mass of a fat bell, it's like a hex bar that goes all the way around your wrist. It gives you that opportunity for circumduction strength all the way around. Huge benefit we've seen with our clients doing that. Clients with really big hands or wrists, they have a hard time getting their hands in and out of there. That's the only complaint that we've had. So the sit to stand, the goblet position, I love these little globes of the fat bell because you can kind of grip around with a neutral wrist, comfortable position, and then compress it, push together, right? Engage that upper body. So we're not just sitting our arms there. We're working that upper half. We're in good, comfortable positions, neutral grips. Hands are in comfortable positions as neutral as we can get them and allowing them to contract and work with some isometric strength here as they sit, deload, re-engage, and just practice that action over and over and over again, okay? My absolute favorite bridge, if I had to pick any bridge at all to do, this is called a self-anchor foot elevated bridge. The foot elevated gives you a great range of motion. The self-anchor gives you upper body posterior activation. The chin is neutral. And then the pelvic tilt in this, as you come up, there's this high lockout point that pretty much simulates the depth that you would swing or do an RDL to or a rack pull to. So we get the range of motion. I get a progressive load, harder on the way up, easier on the way down. I get the entire backside of my body on, from my calves, gastroc, knee flexor, to my hamstrings to hold and try to tip that box over towards me, right? I'm getting bite there. I'm getting my hamstrings and glutes to overlap and engage and pull up. I'm getting my glutes to my lumbar erectors, QL, extensors, all that to stabilize my back and help lever. And I'm getting all the posterior pulling muscles to help me pull my arms down to the floor. So that whole action's on. I'm getting that scapular retraction, I call the platform, right? That the body's going to pivot on, those scapulas that are, retracted down, tucked in, anti-shrug, and then lift on. So you have the whole backside of your body, all these great benefits, all the ranges of motion, the hamstring glute dominant action. This is great, all without vertical load issues, right? Vertical load compressions. So get people really, really strong at breaking at the hip and working the backside of their body. And then as we progress, we can elevate their shoulders into a hip thrust. We can do just pure bands like you see Rachel doing there on the left. Notice the other band on her knees there to keep her abductors on. So a good range there. Or we can do consistent load like Lori's doing on the right with some bands to give her the opportunity to progress her resistance up and through. Now, these are individuals that have not had hip or knee issues, no replacements whatsoever. Barbells or really any kind of consistent external load, especially a bar on hips that have been replaced, very dangerous, very uncomfortable. I would not suggest to do it. Bands are ideal, like you see Rachel on the left, but make sure the band is above the ASIS. It's got to be above the superior side of the pelvis, or else you're pulling the band down on the head of the femur that wants to dislocate, right? So you just have to put it up a little higher than normal, make sure it's above the replacement, basically. Knees should be fine with all this. The flexion isn't deep enough to have any kind of issues. And the internal, external rotations, everything stays straight. The reason this is called a thrust and not a bridge, thrust is done fast on that the acceleration phase. So eccentric down, slow, 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 and then thrust up as quick as you can. Like it should be a 3 to a 0.1, right? 3, 2, 1, up quick. 3, 2, 1, up quick. Like we want to train speed. We want to train dynamic explosion and boom, throw the hips up there and then create that eccentric control on the way down. So each one of these, again, I'm going to do 10 sets of 1. Each one is slam it, retract, control, right? And get that benefit of moving fast at the hips. That's with clients who've progressed to that. And you're like, okay, I feel comfortable. Now, great benefit here, hip, knee, shoulder, arthritic issues, anything that bothers them for exceeded range of motion. But this load now, the more weight we start to put on people, the more benefit we're going to have of getting that said principle to apply, right, to happen. So how can we do that through some hinges? We can do a rack pull. So what Linda's going to do here is a rack pull. She's working to a range of motion. She can go about 2 inches deeper than that, where I feel like she's right at the edge of she's probably going to hurt herself, right? Or it's just a little too deep. So I move my safety catches up 2 inches. So I'm now 2 inches above the point where I feel like she could probably be pretty vulnerable. So we're in a pretty safe range. Then I put her in a center mass bar inside a hex bar. So I know she has no counterweight. It's all right in the center, okay? We got a neutral chin. I know she can work this range and I can load her up pretty heavy. She's got about 105 pounds in hand here. If we were doing this off the floor, she'd be about 30, 40 pounds lighter, okay? So I can work this huge posterior eccentric stretch, slow, slow, slow. I can control my range of motion. She's not gonna go so deep that she's gonna get hurt. I'm actually 2 inches above where I think she might get hurt. And then I can work that overload that she needs to specifically adapt to, due to this imposed demand. I can hit that said principle perfect. And now I can train high-end hinge values, right? I can work up to some pretty heavy loads that we wouldn't be able to do off the floor in a very, very safe fashion. And then as we get better at that and we feel like, okay, these clients, these specific clients are good to go all the way to the floor, but I still want to get the benefit of the bands, that's where these guys come in. And this is my favorite deadlift, okay? Anchored bands on either side. And then I've got it over the hex bar. We've got about 115, 110 pounds on the hex, But those are two 40-pound bands doubled up at 80 pounds once the tension's extended all the way up and the band is doubled, working all the way up to probably, I'd say a little over 100, 120 pounds of pressure, guessing somewhere in there, plus the 100 pounds he's got. So we're at like 220, 230, somewhere in there of lockout. And then back at the bottom, he's back to 120, 130, somewhere around in there. So that's our ultimate goal, is to work up to, and you'll notice that tempo that he had here, up very quick, down, control, up quick, under control, up quick, under control. And that's our range of motion, our under tension. Everything is good mechanics that we have working through these ranges of motion. So that's our hinge, our deadlift component, okay? Now we're gonna move into a split stance. I only have a few minutes left, so I gotta burn. Split stance, these are deloaded actions. Split stance with a band directly from overhead. We're gonna split the feet and work on the rear leg. The rear leg is dominant in all of these, allowing the load to be taken up by the band. So let's say Jerry's 200 pounds. He's not, but let's just say he is. He's got a 60-pound band at full extension. So he's about 140 pounds of his actual body weight, body pressure at the bottom. And then as he comes up, the band is assisting and pulling him. And as he gets up to the top and the band almost goes slack, he's under his own load again, his own body weight. So we were able to train the range of motion, work on the balance, coordination, and the practice of doing the action without load, without body weight load, with lighter than body weight load. And then as that, starts to improve and we start to see lighter bands to use, eventually I'll get him to the point where he can do body weight, and then eventually I can load that. But until we can train the range of motion and practice doing the action like the way it's supposed to be done or the way I want it to be done, we're never going to get there. The amount of single leg quad extensions and single leg presses, it doesn't teach you how to stand with both feet split, balance your body in place and sit on your back leg and eccentrically stretch your quad. Like, you can't replicate that to apply it like this. We have to find a way to train that action. So that's what we're doing here. We deload, we make him lighter, okay? Now, for some of our clients that cannot do split squats or just are super uncomfortable doing it, we'll do the same action, but we'll do that vertically. So while doing a step up, a heel dominant, this band basically makes her lighter at the bottom and gives her some pull. It helps her on the up, but she takes more load as she comes up, right? The band's a little lighter at the top, so she's taking on her body weight. Now, the key down here, you see I put the key is rear leg dominance or rear leg emphasis on both. The back leg on the floor has to do hardly anything for the step up. It needs to just kind of touch down. The top leg needs to do all the work, or else you're just jumping off your bottom leg, zero benefit. The split squat, Jerry on the left, the rear leg is doing 60% of the work. You have to sit back on that leg, sit down, stretch it, and allow it to stretch, reflex, fire up like the rubber band, right? So those are two deloaded options we have that will help us bridge that gap towards eventually doing body weight split squats, body weight step ups, and then eventually loaded split squats, loaded step ups, okay? My favorite carry for those with arthritis or any of the pain tolerant issues is called a reverse grip loaded carry, or don't touch it. So put your hands up, don't touch it, right? That's that same component we talked about. Open hand, extension of the hand, extension of the wrist, work in that big open position, but now the extensors of the wrist have to hold this weight. So those that can carry 45-pound kettlebells, 20-kilo kettlebells, are down to like 12-kilo kettlebells, and it's killing them, right? Maybe even 8-kilo kettlebells, because you're now working the extensors of the wrist, something we just don't do that often. And then we're taking these controlled, very smooth, steps that aren't, that's why we don't call it a farmer walk. We call it a loaded carry, farmer carry, suitcase carry, because it's different. You don't lumber side to side. You don't bounce up and down. You glide like these are full of water and you can't spill them. You glide like you're walking on ice and you don't want to fall, right? Smooth, small steps. I don't want big gates on this. I'm not trying to work on my gait control, my balance, my coordination. I'm trying to stabilize this heavy load that I'm carrying and carrying in a very different way. And I'm trying to stabilize that and transition and get the benefit from these transitions of heavy load with good support under me, where I'm not bouncing, swaying, lurching, lumbering, tumbling around and not doing it right. I'm just getting it done, right? That's not important to me. I want to achieve every action I do efficiently, safely, and then progress it to the next step. So those are all the pieces. I know that was very quick. It gave you a very good idea. We have TOA, Training the Older Adult. We do a full complete course where I teach you all that stuff over 8 weeks. And then we have 2 days that we do live where I teach you how to build your own blueprint like this. And I teach you how to do all these actions, not these ones in particular, but if you look at your screen here real quick, all of these guys, this is a big menu we create, and I teach you how to do all those over 2 days. This year we did it virtually. Typically we do it live, like in gym and studio, and we show you how to do all these actions. But basically it's 10 weeks to teach you all that stuff and the whys and the hows behind it, because I want you to learn all that. So if that's something that's of interest to you, please check out Training the Older Adult. The complete course will be back in 2021. In between now and then, we have an anatomy class that I'll be teaching for personal trainers, anatomy through the eyes of the trainer. That'll be coming up this summer. And then our big one here is our 8-week CEU course. It starts August 17th, so mark your calendars if you're interested. It is CEU approved for 12 hours, 1.2 hours. And every week we go over a different joint, the limitations, and all of the exercises that we can implement to help you overcome those limitations. So basically, we just did the shoulder and the hip with a little bit of other stuff here and there. We're gonna do one of these like today, but for every one of those guys, every one of these joints as we go through. So please check that out. You'll be able to see registration and all that. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, everything else. There's tons of videos on YouTube, so you can check out all the stuff you want on there. And always more to come. FAI also has, I don't know, 3 or 4 other presentations in their membership of mine. Feel free to look at that. But I just want to thank you all very much for giving me some time to turn and burn and go through all that with you. I want to deliver stuff that you can use right away. And so with the exception of like the pivot point arms, you could pretty much, you got bars and straps and bands and levers. You pretty much got everything in most gyms that we did there. It's just learning how to manipulate them. That's what I wanted to give you. So you could see how to do that stuff, how to help your clients now, right? As soon as we're able to get back in the gyms, and a lot of us are opening up now to do that, how can you manipulate, rig things just a little bit different to help them overcome those limitations? And in most cases, it's an arthritic component that bugs them or hurts them. Those small changes make huge effects in the long run and makes you that much more professional, your services that much more coveted, right? Wanted, protected, and engaged. And that's how we get referrals and we build our businesses, from those little things that we do that make all the differences in the world to our clients. So thank you very much. I'm here for Q&A. Fire away. I will stay on digitally as long as you like. As long as there are questions coming up, I'll be here to type with you and give you answers. Feel free to text me. That is my personal phone number right there, and my email. Have any other questions you want to connect after this, I'm happy to chat with you. And thank you, Dan and Cody, again, and all the FAIers out there. I appreciate you all. Have a great conference, and we will see you next time. Take care.